Good morning. My name is Jordan Hamilton, and this is my presentation on input devices, how we interact with a PC. So, let me begin by asking a question. When you think of input devices, what comes to mind? Any answers?
Keyboards?
Yep. Yeah, about the accurate response I expected. So, what is an input device is the question. Well, an input device is a piece of hardware that connects to your computer, and through them it sends data and control signals to a processing system or information appliance on that computer. So, you named a couple devices just a moment ago, and here's a couple more. Yeah, there's a lot of input devices, so there's quite a bit to go through on this presentation. Let's begin with the more well-known ones. So with the mouse, what year do you think the mouse was first invented in? Any ideas?
86.
86? Well, you'd be wrong. The first mouse was this thing. So, let's take a look at what this is.
It is. But it turns out that the concept of using something other than those clunky arrow keys to move a cursor around predates the modern mouse by several decades. I'm talking about the trackball, which sprang into existence all the way back in 1946 as part of a British Navy project to help track aircraft on a radar. This concept was later adapted by the Canadian Navy for their own tracking system, which used a small 5-pin bowling ball, of all things, for the ball, because presumably they couldn't get funding for a real one. Anywho, these early implementations were rather crude, with the ball placed on top of spinning metal discs that came into contact with wires. But because the UK considered it a military secret, the idea of using a spinning or rolling object as a computer input device wouldn't end up being realized in the civilian world until years later, when the first true mouse was invented in 1964 at Stanford University. Now, unlike modern mice, which have total freedom of movement in one plane, this early mouse only had two pizza cutter looking wheels that allowed movement up and down or side to side, but not at the same time. The inventors decided to call their creation a mouse because the wire sticking out at the end looked like a rodent's tail, and they used it in conjunction with the NLS, a DARPA-funded computer system that included clickable hyperlinks. Remember, this was nearly 30 years before the internet started becoming widespread. Soon after that, the mouse was picked up by his...
So yeah, quite an early introduction to the concept of a mouse. Going back to the trackball from 1946, it was invented by Ralph Benjamin, who worked for the British Royal Navy Scientific Service. It was designed as a fire control radar plotting system named Comprehensive Display System, and as the video mentioned, it was kept a military secret for many years. So, in more modern times, trackball mice have a much more compact design, but it's kind of the same thing, though far more advanced. We know them as this. But this is still a bit cumbersome to work with, so for more commercial use, we have the laser or optical mouse, which uses a light to track movement, and it's often connected via USB or Bluetooth receiver to operate. I actually have one down there that you can pass around, like this. And there's a wireless one. Next up though, we have the keyboard. It's how we enter data into the machine. Now, as you might expect, the keyboard has its origins with the typewriter. But what if I told you that this actually wasn't exactly the origins of the keyboard? When do you think the predecessor of the typewriter was invented? Any ideas? None? Well, the typewriter's predecessor was made as far back as 1575 in the Scrittura Tattile, an invention of Italian printmaker Francesco Rampazzetto, made to press letters onto paper. But moving way further into the present day, our modern keyboards are an input device that uses keys on it to transmit data and signals to the computer, either activating commands via combination or putting data onto the screen, whether it's letters or numbers. Now, next up, there's our modern keyboard. There's actually one right there as well. Next up, we have microphones, which allow a user to speak directly to the computer. This device was first conceptualized in 1665 by English physicist Robert Hooke, and it was invented more properly in the US by Emil Berliner and Thomas Edison. In modern times, though, the device allows users to interact with programs, record audio files, speak to others across speech programs like Skype or Discord, allowing for live conversation from much further away. And it comes in two varieties. You can have either a headset, like the one right there, or you can have one that just stands at a base. With these more sophisticated models, the more sophisticated models you can buy, you can either control the volume on a remote, like that one right there, or it can be on the base of the microphone via a volume switch. To demonstrate that, here's a video.
Gamers spend big money on peripherals, and with games like Overwatch and CSGO, it's pretty easy to see why. I mean, having the best advantage can make you be the better player, and can be the difference between getting the final kill yourself, or having it taken away from you in terrible style. But in the day and age of Twitch streaming and YouTube gaming, a lot of people want to do more voiceover, and they want to talk to their friends with the best quality microphone possible, and have it all nicely recorded. So a question that often comes up is whether it's worth using a headset, or whether it's worth actually upgrading to a dedicated microphone to get the best audio quality possible. And I wanted to do this little video for you to explain the differences and give you some examples and see what you can realistically expect from different products on the market. And this all came about when Asus very kindly sent out the Magnus microphone for review. But to be honest with you, a review of a microphone would last around about 30 seconds, and they will say that the audio quality is very good, but maybe it's a little bit on the expensive side. Not really that much of a video, and I thought that this would be a lot more useful for you. So we'll start with headsets, and if you don't know already, essentially a headset is just a pair of headphones with a microphone attached that can plug into your PC or games console, either wirelessly or with a wired connection, either USB or standard stereo headphone jacks. And they're very cheap and they're very cheerful. You can get very expensive ones, of course, but most people will probably look at something like the HyperX Cloud 2, which is a very good, well, it's a very good price point because it's around about £70, and both the microphone and then the stereo drivers perform very, very well for the money. And this is going to be more than good enough for most people. If you want to step up to something a little bit better, then you can get something that's maybe wireless, or you can get something that just sounds a lot better. So something like Astro's A40TR is a very good example of a headset that sounds excellent and has a very good microphone for recordings as well. But while they are definitely a lot cheaper than picking up a set of headphones and then of course a dedicated microphone, they don't really sound that great in comparison. And a lot of them especially sort of skim on the microphone. So if you're buying a headset and you're buying it for the microphone quality, you're definitely going to have to do your research, because sadly, a lot of them, to be honest with you, just aren't great. And headsets often have the advantage of actually being a little bit cleaner when it comes to background noise. And the reason for this is not because the DAC is going to be better or anything like that, because it's normally going to be better in the USB microphone, but just because the microphone is so close to your face, it's going to pick up less noise that's coming from your desk. So if you're someone that's playing first-person shooters or a game that utilizes a mechanical keyboard, let's say, then it's going to be a lot more free from the clickety-clackety that's going on your desk. But then again, on the flip side, you can also get a little bit more static in a headset microphone. If it's not a USB one, or if you're using a sort of subpart DAC, then you can just pick up some static from your motherboard or just from any other source that, again, can actually be very distracting. So it's sort of pros and cons of either, really.
As you can see, headsets can have their own problems of generally being risky in terms of static and quality, but desk microphones can also pick up a lot of noise, though it does have a higher quality sound. Next up, we have joypads. So, a lot of us play games on the computer, I imagine, and keyboard and mouse doesn't exactly cut it for a lot of various games. As such, you can plug in a controller if you want to do something more traditional that you might be used to. So how it works is the controller will plug in or connect via wireless signal to the computer, and after it configures drives, it can either map to the preferences for relevant programs that you need, or it can spoof itself as a Windows recognized controller, such as the Xbox One. Though a lot of them use a USB connection, some, such as the DualShock 4, like the one I have right there, use a Bluetooth signal to connect to computers that have that function. Although it should be warned that some Bluetooth controllers, like the DualShock 4, require third-party programs to function properly. That's a word of warning. So, when you think of a lot of gaming PCs, you might think of this controller, just a generic brand, something. Or, you're probably thinking of this. It's a lot more higher quality. And then we get to tablets, which allow a more precise touch than the mouse. So, what can you do with a tablet on your PC? Well, I imagine a lot of folks that use Photoshop or like to draw on their tablet would love to connect it to a computer rather than use a clunky, imprecise mouse. You can instead use a pen for your art, like so. Although, some configuration will be necessary.
Let's work better in Photoshop. The tools we use should be an extension of ourselves. The writer has a pen, the painter has a brush. But what does a Photoshop artist use? A mouse? Oh, God. Well, there's a better tool for the job. This is a Wacom tablet. They make editing in Photoshop easier, and you have more control over tools like the brush tool. Much like a colored pencil or a paintbrush, the harder you press, the more paint will apply. You can also change the size of your brush simply by changing how hard you press. I've been using a tablet for over 10 years, and I wouldn't think of editing my images without one. Now for this video, we're using a Wacom Intuos Pro Medium tablet, and this is a brand new tablet. It has not been set up. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you download the drivers from Wacom's website. And that's going to put preferences in your computer. So let's go ahead and show you what I use to set up my tablet so I can work faster in Photoshop. After installing the drivers, I've got my Wacom tablet here in my system preferences. Let's go ahead and click there. You can see we have our device information. We've got some different functions. You can turn touch on or off. Mostly we're going to be hanging out right over here with our pen. And you can see we have options for the pen, eraser, and the mapping. Now, starting off here at the pen, we have our tip feel. And this is basically how hard or how soft you press on your brush. I prefer having a little bit of a harder tip feel. So we're just going to take that and bring that right up. And you can press pretty hard with these things. I've used many tablets over the years, and you really don't want it wearing these little nibs out too fast. So don't worry about pressing hard with that. And here you get a good idea of how hard you're actually pressing. Now, here on the bottom, this is a super important one. Double-click distance. This is like with a mouse, you can double-click somewhere, and it does something. All right. Now, the same is true with your tablet, but it assumes that you're not going to be clicking this in the same exact place twice because there's a little bit of movement here. Now, it's super important here that you take this double-click distance and turn it off. You want this completely off, or in Photoshop, sometimes it waits for you to click again for that double-click distance, and it will just totally throw things off. So, big one here, make sure to turn that off. Next we have our tilt sensitivity. Now some brushes in Photoshop will know if you're tilting your pen from one side to another and have different effects. I don't tend to use those brushes very often, so I just leave this tilt sensitivity back to normal. Now, the next thing we want to do is change our button layout because I want to be able to undo with my pen. I'm all the time making mistakes and I want to undo very quickly. So the first thing we're going to do, the pen actually has two buttons on it. There's a forward button and a back button. Our back button here, I'm going to change this to a keyboard keystroke. There we go. Now, you can actually just hold down the keys and undo or step backwards in Photoshop. It's Option-Command-Z. So just hit Option-Command-Z. I'll just call this undo. There we go. And we're going to hit OK. So now, literally, every time I hit that, it's going to undo in Photoshop, which is sweet. Now, our next button is right-click. This is forward. I just leave that where it is because brush tools, all kinds of menus in Photoshop, you want to be able to right-click to open up more menus. So I have undo and right-click. Now, moving on to the eraser. You can flip this thing around and have it activate, for instance, your eraser tool. I have literally never, ever done that. Other than to see if it works or not. I just do this and I hit E for the eraser tool or B for the brush, or usually I just use layer mask, so I pretty much don't even use the eraser tool. But anyway, if you like the eraser tool and you feel like flipping it around, you can do that. I pretty much just leave this eraser tool alone. And now we're moving on to the mapping of your tablet, and that's a big deal because the size of your tablet correlates to the size of your screen. Now, for instance, if I grab my pen and I move up here to the top left of the tablet, you can see I'm at the top left of my screen in Photoshop. And as I move down to the bottom right of my tablet, I move down to the bottom right of my screen. Now, this does make sense. However, I'm moving my hand quite a long distance to actually move across my screen. If I just grab a mouse, I can move it right up here and I'm at the top of the screen, and I can move it right down here, I'm at the bottom of the screen. So I'm moving the mouse, maybe an inch, and I'm having to move the tablet, 10 or so inches just to move across the screen. So we can set this up to change the proportions. So I'm only going to use a portion of the tablet and have that correlate to the screen. So here we want to choose screen area. You want to make sure that is on full. You want to be able to edit the entire screen. But your tablet area,
And as you can see, often these art tablets come with a smart pen that kind of works in tandem to enable you to do whatever you need to do in Photoshop or whatever paint program you're using. But there's also more functionality for tablets, and that is you can transfer files onto the device or back onto your computer, and you can even make it into a second monitor if you want to set that up. For Windows, you'll probably want to use an Android tablet, however. It's just an Apple tablet right there. For our last input device, let's talk about cameras. Specifically, when you think of cameras, for a computer, you probably think of the webcam that you set up either on top or to the side of your computer. And they often look like this. Pretty familiar design. These things are pretty versatile though. It interacts with you and the computer via what the camera can see. And these modern cameras include models like the 120 Space Cam pictured here, and the Microsoft Kinect. Now, functions that the webcam can do, for example, it can show the viewpoint of your room to someone on the other end, again, via Skype or Discord, commonly, for video conferences. It can allow video security by taping what goes on in your room if you had an intruder anywhere. And it can even scan your facial features to even allow someone to log into your computer. So, often home computers will require one of these sort of models to really get the most out of it. But in laptop models, often you will find a webcam built into the top of the monitor, right about at the center. And also tablets carry one as well. Well, that's about it for the major ones, but there are quite a few more to be discussed if you want to look deeper into it, like barcode readers and fingerprint scanners. Now, with all these devices to use, it should be clear by now that your computer can really do almost anything if you put in the right equipment. But it's up to you and your budget to decide which ones are best for you to use. And that concludes my presentation.